Welcome in, everybody. We're diving deep today into the world of schizophrenia, and we've got some really interesting excerpts from Schizophrenia, second edition, by Mario Mage and Norman Sartorius.
It's such a dense book. So much to unpack.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just flipping through it, it's clear this is going to be a thought-provoking one for sure.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to think how much our understanding of this has changed, even from the early days.
Oh, yeah.
When they were calling it dementia precox, like Emil Kraepelin did way back.
All right. And that whole idea that it was like an inevitable decline into mental deterioration, which thankfully we now know.
Not always the case.
Yeah.
The book actually talks about how the term schizophrenia, introduced by Eugen Bleuler, really marked a shift, to recognizing the variety of experiences and outcomes.
Yeah, and that it's not this like one-size-fits-all kind of condition.
Exactly.
But rather this spectrum with so many nuances.
And speaking of nuances, this book really dives into the complexities of diagnosing schizophrenia.
Oh.
And how tricky it can be to pinpoint, even for
experienced professionals.
Even for the most experienced professional.
Yeah, because there's no like single test, right? It's all about piecing together the symptoms, observations, and what the individual is experiencing.
Absolutely.
Right.
We rely on those classification systems like the DSM and the ICD.
Right.
But even those have limitations.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They rely on clusters of symptoms, and none of those symptoms are actually exclusive to schizophrenia.
So it makes you wonder, how do we navigate that gray area, right? Like, how do we make sure we're not misinterpreting certain behaviors or experiences as
schizophrenia?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, careful observation and really listening to the individual's experience comes in.
Right.
And the book actually highlights this fascinating case of the Genane quadruplets.
Oh, wow, the Genane quadruplets?
Or identical sisters.
Yeah, I remember reading about them in psych class. It's just mind-boggling.
All diagnosed with schizophrenia?
How they can have the same genes.
Yeah.
But such different.
Completely different.
Journeys with the illness.
It challenges that assumption, right? The genetics is the sole determinant.
For sure.
It shows the powerful influence of environment, personal experiences, even random chance.
So genetics might lay the groundwork.
It might.
But it's that interplay of all these other factors that really shapes how schizophrenia manifests in each person.
It emphasizes that we can't just look at someone's genes and predict their future.
Right.
We need to consider the whole picture.
The whole picture. And that kind of leads us into how the book breaks down the symptoms of schizophrenia into these three dimensions. You've got the positive, negative, and disorganized. Yeah. And I feel like most people only think of the positive symptoms.
The hallucination there.
Yeah, the hallucinations, the delusions, those things that are kind of added to a person's experience.
But it's crucial to remember that they're only one part of the puzzle.
Right.
Negative symptoms like diminished emotional expression or lack of motivation can be just as debilitating.
And they're so often less understood.
Yeah.
It's like a spectrum within a spectrum.
It is.
You can have someone primarily struggling with negative symptoms.
Right.
And someone else who's dominated by disorganized thoughts and behaviors.
Exactly.
And the book actually gives some really vivid examples.
It does.
I think that helps paint a picture.
A clearer picture of how these symptoms might show up in a person's life.
So, for example, with disorganized thinking, they talk about someone struggling to follow a conversation or exhibiting unpredictable behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those are really helpful illustrations.
Yeah.
And that's why this three-dimensional model is so useful. It helps us understand the diversity of presentations and tailor treatment approaches.
Tailor treatment? Yeah, because it's not a one-size-fits-all.
No.
So beyond just symptoms and diagnoses, though, the book seems to really advocate for seeing the individual beyond the label, right?
The person behind the diagnosis.
Understanding their specific needs and experiences, I think that seems so crucial.
Absolutely. In fact, the book highlights this idea of basic symptoms.
Basic symptoms, okay.
Which are these subtle subjective experiences individuals often report before the onset.
Before the onset.
Of more noticeable symptoms.
Okay, so
like feeling overwhelmed by sensory input.
Okay.
Or having trouble focusing.
Interesting. So someone might be experiencing these internal shifts long before anything outwardly appears, quote unquote, wrong.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
It makes me wonder if we get too fixated on the label schizophrenia.
Right.
Are we missing crucial early signs? Or overlooking the individual's unique struggles?
Yeah, it really raises questions about how we approach diagnosis and treatment then. Like, are we focusing enough on those early subtle cues? Are we listening closely enough to what individuals are telling us about their own experiences.
It's a point worth reflecting on for sure.
Yeah.
The book seems to be urging a more holistic, individualized approach to understanding and supporting people with schizophrenia.
And that brings us to treatment, because the book explores a variety of treatment options.
It does.
And emphasizes that it's not just about managing symptoms.
Right.
It's about helping individuals live full and meaningful lives.
That's where a multifaceted approach comes into play.
Okay.
The book talks about pharmacological treatment, of course.
Right.
But also highlights the importance of psychotherapy and rehabilitation.
So it's about finding the right combination of interventions that work best for that person.
For that individual.
Taking into account their needs and goals.
Exactly. The book even cautions against relying solely on medication.
Oh, really?
Pointing out that it's not a magic bullet.
Interesting.
It emphasizes the potential of psychotherapy in addressing those emotional and social challenges that often accompany schizophrenia.
Like giving them the tools to navigate daily life?
Yeah.
Build resilience?
Yeah.
Develop coping mechanisms?
And the book stresses the importance of a strong support system.
Of course.
Especially from family and community. It highlights the role of education and understanding in reducing stigma.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
Because that stigma can be such a barrier.
A huge barrier.
For individuals and families, it leads to isolation, shame, reluctance to seek help.
Absolutely. It's about creating a more inclusive and supportive environment where people can feel comfortable talking about their experiences and seeking help without fear of judgment.
And that's where these kinds of conversations become so important.
Exactly.
The more we understand about schizophrenia, the better equipped we are to challenge those misconceptions and create a more compassionate world for everyone affected by it.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
For sure.
And the book does a fantastic job of shedding light on the complexities of this often misunderstood condition.
And speaking of shedding light, the book also delves into the economic impact of schizophrenia, which I think is something that often gets overlooked.
It's a significant burden.
Yeah.
Not just on individuals and families, but on society as a whole.
As a whole.
The book highlights those staggering costs associated with hospitalization, medication, long-term care.
And those are just the direct costs.
Those are just the direct costs.
What about like lost productivity? It's a toll it takes on families and caregivers.
Those are much harder to quantify, but no less significant.
Right.
The book makes a compelling case for investing in research and early intervention programs as a way to reduce the overall burden of schizophrenia.
It makes you think about the long-term benefits of that kind of proactive support, right? Like if we can identify individuals at risk, provide early intervention, we might be able to prevent or delay the onset of the illness.
It's a proactive approach.
Yeah.
That could potentially lead to significant cost savings and, more importantly, improve the lives of countless individuals.
It brings up a really important point, this idea of prevention in mental health.
Right.
It's not as straightforward as like preventing the flu, but it's certainly a crucial aspect that deserves more attention.
And the book touches on various approaches to prevention, including public education campaigns to reduce stigma and encourage early help seeking.
So creating a culture where mental health is valued.
Yes.
Where people feel empowered to reach out for support.
Without shame or hesitation?
Without shame or hesitation, exactly. And that involves challenging societal norms.
It does.
Promoting accurate information.
Yeah.
Fostering empathy and understanding.
So it's not just about treating the illness, but about supporting individuals in all aspects of their lives. Helping them navigate challenges and achieve their full potential.
And that is a message I think we can all get behind.
A message of hope.
Yeah.
Resilience.
And the power of human connection in the face of adversity. Well said. Well said. It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, we have.
Of this complex topic.
We have so much more to unpack and explore in this book.
There is a lot, and I'm curious to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Me too.
There's still so much to learn and discuss, and I'm sure it'll be a fascinating journey.
It will.
Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far. What are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you?
I think the emphasis on individuality really resonated with me.
Okay.
It's a powerful reminder that behind the diagnosis, there's a unique person with their own story, strengths, and challenges.
That's a great point. It's so easy to get caught up
in the labels.
Yeah, in the labels and categories, but we need to remember that human element.
The human element.
The individual experiences and needs that shape each person's journey.
And building on that, I think the importance of a holistic approach to treatment
Yeah,
is something we should keep in mind.
definitely.
It's not just about medication, it's about finding the right combination of interventions that address the whole person,
The whole
their
person.
physical, emotional, and social well-being.
Absolutely. Empowering individuals with the tools they need to navigate life, build resilience, create a fulfilling future.
And let's not forget about the role we all play in combating stigma
Right.
and creating a more supportive environment for those affected by schizophrenia.
You're right. We can all contribute to a culture of understanding, acceptance, and empathy.
It starts with education, open conversations, and challenging our own preconceived notions.
It does. It does. And I believe that by working together, we can make a real difference in the lives of individuals and families touched by this complex condition.
A real difference.
Well said. Well said. So we'll take a quick break and then dive into the next chapter of our exploration.
Sounds good. Stay tuned.
One thing that really struck me in the last chapter was this idea that schizophrenia might not be a single disorder,
Oh, really?
but rather like a spectrum
Oh, interesting.
of related conditions.
Okay.
Considering the wide range of symptoms and how differently it can present from person to person.
Makes sense.
And the book dives into this idea, talking about how conditions like schizotypal personality disorder and schizoaffective disorder fit into this broader spectrum. Okay, can you elaborate on that a bit? I've heard those terms before, but I'm not entirely sure how they relate to schizophrenia.
Schizotypal personality disorder, for instance, involves having some traits that are similar to those seen in schizophrenia,
Okay.
but not as severe or debilitating.
So like a milder form.
Not exactly milder, but rather a different expression of similar underlying vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Imagine a dimmer switch for certain personality traits.
Okay.
In schizotypal personality disorder, that dimmer switch might be turned up a bit,
Okay.
leading to things like unusual perceptions or social anxiety.
Interesting.
So someone with schizotypal personality disorder might experience those things,
Right.
but they wouldn't necessarily meet the criteria for a full-blown schizophrenia diagnosis.
Gotcha. And then there's schizoaffective disorder.
Right, which is a bit more complex.
Okay.
It involves a combination of psychotic symptoms, like those seen in schizophrenia,
Right.
along with mood episodes like those in bipolar disorder or major depression.
So it's like a blend of both.
Yes. It's like having features of both conditions occurring simultaneously. And this can make diagnosis and treatment particularly challenging.
Yeah, it sounds like navigating this spectrum requires a lot of
Careful consideration.
careful consideration and individualized assessment.
Absolutely. And the book emphasizes the importance of looking beyond those rigid categories
Right.
and recognizing the shared features and overlapping symptoms that connect these different diagnoses.
It's fascinating how this concept of a spectrum really challenges our traditional understanding of mental illness.
It does.
It suggests a more fluid and interconnected view.
Exactly. And it raises questions about whether we're focusing too much on labels
Right.
and not enough on understanding the underlying processes at play.
Which brings us to another intriguing concept the book mentions.
Schizotypy.
Schizotypy.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, what is that and how does it fit into this whole picture?
Well, schizotypy refers to a personality dimension characterized by certain traits like unusual perceptual experiences, social anxiety, or odd thinking patterns.
Okay.
And these traits are often present in individuals with schizophrenia,
Okay.
and interestingly in their relatives as well.
Oh, so even if someone doesn't have schizophrenia, they might still exhibit some of these schizotypal traits.
That's right. It's thought to represent a subclinical expression of the genetic vulnerability to schizophrenia.
Interesting.
In other words, some people might inherit a predisposition to these traits,
Right.
but they don't necessarily develop the full-blown disorder.
It makes you wonder what tips the scales then,
It does.
right? If someone has these traits, what factors might push them toward developing schizophrenia while others remain relatively unaffected?
That's a question researchers are actively trying to answer.
Of course.
They're studying schizotypy, looking for biological markers and environmental triggers that might contribute to the development of the illness.
So it's like a puzzle trying to piece together all these factors that interact to shape the course of schizophrenia and these related conditions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And understanding schizotypy might hold valuable clues to identifying individuals at risk
Oh,
and developing preventive strategies.
that's huge. Now, I'm curious about treatment for these spectrum disorders.
Okay.
Is it similar to the approaches used for schizophrenia?
There are definitely overlaps,
Okay.
but there are also important distinctions.
Okay.
Medication, particularly antipsychotics, can be helpful in managing psychotic symptoms across the spectrum.
But I imagine there are challenges, especially considering the potential side effects.
Yeah, that's a major concern.
Right.
Many of the older typical antipsychotics
Yeah.
can have significant side effects,
Right.
like movement disorders or weight gain, which can be particularly problematic for individuals with spectrum disorders who might be more sensitive.
So finding the right medication and dosage is crucial.
Absolutely. And that's why newer atypical antipsychotics, which tend to have fewer side effects, are often preferred,
Okay.
particularly for individuals with spectrum disorders.
Makes sense. It sounds like a delicate balancing act, weighing the benefits against the risks.
It highlights the importance of close monitoring,
Right.
open communication between the individual and their healthcare provider, and a willingness to adjust treatment plans as needed.
Of course, beyond medication, what other treatment options are available?
Psychotherapy plays a vital role in managing these spectrum disorders.
Okay.
It can help individuals develop coping mechanisms for stress and anxiety,
Yeah.
improve their social and interpersonal skills, and navigate the challenges they face.
It's about providing them with the tools and support to live full and meaningful lives.
Exactly. And it's particularly important for those who might not fully benefit from medication alone or who experience significant side effects.
So really taking a comprehensive approach, considering the individual's needs and preferences.
And that's a theme that resonates throughout this book.
Yeah.
It's not just about managing symptoms, it's about empowering individuals to live their best lives possible.
This has been incredibly insightful. It's amazing how much depth there is to this topic. And it makes me realize how much more there is to learn
A little more to learn.
about schizophrenia and its complexities.
I agree. And I think the book does a fantastic job of highlighting the need for ongoing research and a continued commitment to understanding and supporting those affected by these conditions.
It's a journey of discovery, isn't it?
It is.
As we learn more, we can develop more effective treatments, reduce stigma, and ultimately create a more inclusive and compassionate world.
Well said.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see where the next part of this deep dive takes us.
Me too.
There's still so much to uncover and discuss.
Let's jump right in and explore what else this fascinating book has to offer. As we've been exploring all these different facets of schizophrenia, one thing that keeps coming to mind is just the sheer scope of its impact.
It's true. It doesn't just affect the individual, right?
Right.
It ripples outward. It touches families, communities, even entire societies.
And the book really drives that point home,
It does.
particularly when it comes to the economic burden.
Oh, the economic burden of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
The numbers are just staggering when you think about the costs associated with hospitalization, medication, long-term care.
Right. All of that adds up.
All of it adds up.
And those are just the direct costs.
Just the direct cost.
We haven't even talked about the indirect costs, like lost productivity, the strain on caregivers.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that these indirect costs are often harder to measure,
Yeah.
but they're no less real. They represent a significant burden on families and society as a whole.
It's a reminder that the impact extends so far beyond just the individual. These ripple effects we can't ignore.
Yeah, and that's why the book advocates for a multifaceted approach
Okay.
to addressing this burden. It's not just about treating the individual.
Right.
It's about supporting families, providing resources, investing in research.
Speaking of research, the book seems to place a lot of emphasis on the need for continued exploration and discovery.
It's crucial. We've come a long way in our understanding,
Yeah.
but there's still so much we don't know. So much gaps in our knowledge about its causes, its development, the most effective ways to treat it.
Feels like we're just beginning to scratch the surface.
We're just scratching the surface of this incredibly complex condition.
And the book highlights the importance of investigating all these different avenues, from genetics and neurobiology to the social and environmental factors.
It's about taking a holistic approach to research, recognizing that schizophrenia is influenced by this complex interplay of factors.
Right. And as we gain a deeper understanding, we can hopefully develop more targeted and effective treatments.
More effective treatments.
Interventions that address the root causes, not just managing symptoms.
Exactly.
It's exciting to think about the potential breakthroughs that lie ahead.
The possibilities.
Yeah, the possibility of discovering new medications, new therapies, new ways to support individuals and families.
And beyond treatment, research also plays a vital role in prevention efforts.
Okay.
The book discusses this idea of identifying individuals at risk early on and providing support to potentially delay or even prevent the onset of the illness.
Wow, that's a powerful concept. Imagine if we could intervene early enough to alter the trajectory.
It's a promising area of research.
Yeah.
And one that holds the potential to significantly reduce the burden of schizophrenia on individuals, and society.
It makes you think about the importance of awareness and education.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The more we understand about schizophrenia, the better equipped we are to identify those early warning signs.
To seek help.
And seek help.
Early detection and intervention can make a world of difference.
A world of difference. And that brings us back to the importance of reducing stigma.
Yes.
Challenging those misconceptions, creating a more supportive and understanding environment.
For sure.
We need to foster a culture where mental health is valued.
Absolutely.
Where individuals feel comfortable speaking openly about their experiences and seeking help without fear of judgment.
Breaking down those barriers, creating a sense of community where everyone feels supported and empowered.
And that's something we can all contribute to.
We can.
Whether it's through education advocacy or simply by being more mindful of our language and our attitudes.
It's about recognizing that schizophrenia is a human experience.
Right.
Not something to be feared or ashamed of.
And remembering that behind the diagnosis, there's a unique individual.
A unique individual.
With their own strengths, resilience, and capacity for growth.
Absolutely.
This has been such an enlightening deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective.
Me too.
On schizophrenia.
The book does a fantastic job of exploring the multifaceted nature of this condition, from the science to the human impact.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn.
Always more to learn.
And that our understanding is constantly evolving.
Constantly evolving.
And it's a call to action for all of us to be more informed, more compassionate, and more engaged in creating a world where everyone affected by schizophrenia feels supported and empowered.
Well said.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery.
It's been a pleasure, and I encourage everyone listening to continue learning, asking questions, and advocating for a more understanding and supportive world for those living with schizophrenia.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
And by deepening our understanding, we can make a real difference in the lives of others.
A real difference.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep seeking knowledge, and keep the conversation going.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you all for listening.